Hey guys, welcome to part 2 of the lesson series in the style of country swing guitar. In this lesson, it's just going to be me talking and showing you some stuff, some ideas with respect to the major and minor blues. So there is no tab and there is no backing track. In fact, if you want to practice to a backing track, you can download the first part 1 of this lesson series. If you're purchasing the lesson, then the backing track is already in the download folder. And I should say this lesson is sort of geared to students who already have an idea of the major and minor blues scales. If you're not familiar with the major and minor blues scales, you probably want to step back and work on that beforehand. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at the major blues shape in this B flat, key of B flat, which we originally started in. So we're working around the 6th position at the 6th fret. It's our root note, B flat. And we got a couple of different ways of playing this. When we play our flat third, we can either grab the flat third on the 6th fret, on the 6th string at the 9th fret, or grab the flat third back here at the 4th fret of the 5th string. I like playing it back on the 4th fret of the 5th string because in a lot of country we have these hammer ins from the flat third to the major third to the root note. So I prefer this shape, leading off with your middle finger. And I can extend that up the neck if I wanted to by hitting the second tone and the flat third again. So if I play that again, alright, for our minor shape, most of you are already going to know the minor blues form. It's just we start off at the same root note position in our flat third. Got that chromatic walk from the 4, the flat 5, the 5, flat 7, root note, flat third, 4, flat 5, 5, flat 7, and then the 1, or the root note. And you can extend that again up to that flat third if you want to. And what I suggested in the first lesson was practicing descending down the major blues in this position and then ascending back up through the minor form and switching it back up. So to give you an example of that, and so we get something like this. Or we could and we could switch it up, play down the minor blues and then come back up on the major blues. And you have to really kind of make this interesting. You want to throw some swing in there, kind of get a swing feel for what you're playing, like I was doing right there. And you just come up with all kinds of licks. Let's see. And we're limited to a lot of what we can play in these positions, so sometimes the licks begin sounding routine, but that's the purpose of really practicing these things, is to get a feel for where certain notes are within these scales and how phrasing is a big issue, which characterizes a certain player, a certain style, makes him stand apart from other players. So we could look at some different styles of phrasing later on. What I would recommend is, after you've done some ascending and playing back and down, back and forth through these shapes, is move them and up and down the neck. You've got 5 different forms or 5 different positions. I'm just showing you one. There's several other positions up and down the neck. Do the same thing with them. After you get a good idea of a good feel for playing this way, start looking for key notes the first thing I would point out would be knowing where your third is in all these positions, your third and your flat third. So we get our third from our major blues scale, and we get our flat third from our minor blues scale. So and we actually have flat third in both the minor and the major blues. And if I didn't say that correctly, what I meant to say was major third from our major blues scale. Our minor third comes actually from both the major blues scale and the minor blues scale. So we got to kind of double up on that note. The minor third is always going to be in this position. That's always a pretty important note with respect to jazz, or not note, but a little lick there with respect to jazz and country. So whether if you start out in your major blues, you got a flat third, and then the major third. And that's always a common lick, going from the flat third to the root note as a passing tone. There you've got another one at the 6th fret of the 3rd string. That's your flat third, major third, root note. After you get an idea of where your, and you'll see that again over and over in these licks that I show you. After you get an idea of where the flat third are, and where that passing tone from the flat third to the major third back to the root note. Next, you want to look for the flat 7. The flat 7 is important to your the minor blues scale, and so the flat 7 will always be a whole step back from your root note. We've got a root note here, B flat. So in this position, our flat 7 is at the 6th fret of the 4th string. And so a common lick is passing from that flat third to the third, and then root note back to the flat 7, back to the root note. And you could do the same in the lower part of the neck. And you also have a flat 7. No, I'm wrong about that. Right here, in your minor blues. So if we were playing up the neck, there I combined flat third, root note, 5th, flat 7, back to the root note, minor third to the 2, which comes out of the major blues scale. So here I'm combining notes throughout each of the scales, kind of come up with some swingier licks. Okay, once you get an idea of where your flat 7 and flat third are in those scales, I mean, you could spend forever creating licks based around that type of phrasing which I was showing you. I'm combining these two scales together. The next note that's interesting that comes out of these, well, that really comes back out of our minor blues scale, is the flat 5, and that's where you get a lot of more jazzier licks. I guess the flat 5 is interesting in the sense that you can use it as a passing tone, but you can also build some diminished triads off of it and sort of play through some interesting arpeggio types of things. More commonly, you'll hear like a. So there, I slid from the 5 back to the flat 5 up to my 4, which comes out of the minor blues. Actually, I'm just playing a chromatic. Actually, I'm just playing some chromatic notes there, hammering back in from the flat third to the third. note, flat 7, back to the root note again. So C, after you start learning where these notes are, you realize these licks aren't that complicated at all. And you know, that's something Brent Mason will use a lot in his country stuff. Things like that. Just keeps it going on and on forever. A lot of this has to do with phrasing. We'll talk about that in a second. I mentioned arpeggios, or triads really. You get a kind of a diminished triad. I'm sorry. There's our root note, our flat third, flat 5. I actually threw in the well, the 6th tone. That comes out of our major blues scale, so that would be all right. And you got a lot of different combinations of things you can play there. You have another one. That's flat 5, 6, root note to the minor third. So to give you an idea of combining all of this together, you could play something like, let me think. So if I combined all this together, so hear those diminished triads in there? They're all over in these when you start combining these shapes together. And that will definitely lead you into more of a jazzier, swingier style of playing. And notice that I'm actually throwing in a chromatic note in there. Walked. It's not part of our major or minor blues scale. I'm throwing in the major 7th. Which is something that once you get used to doing these, used to these scales, you can do that. You can add in. You got 3 additional notes that are not in your major and minor blues shapes, which flat 7, the flat 2, and then what would it be, the flat 6. You'll see the major 7 a lot in country and jazz, which is not going to be part of your major and minor blues scales, but you know, it becomes easy once you understand this to add those additional notes in there. So another thing is, by adding these 2 scales together, combined, we get a lot of chromatic movements in here. For example, we know that the major blues, like our initial in lesson 1, this was a lick we were playing. We got a chromatic walk from the 2, the flat 3rd, and the 3rd. In country, this is very common to use these patterns so you can get these triplets. Albert Lee will use them all the time up and down the neck. So that's one thing to look out for in your major blues. The 2, flat 3rd to the 3rd. So you're going to get these triplet fills. You also get the flat 7, I'm sorry, the 4, sharp 4 or flat 5 and the 5 out of the minor blues, which is right here. Now I'm adding in additional notes that aren't part of our scale, but you can sort of do that. And so that's one thing to look out. Look for your triplets. So there's some important things to remember when you're practicing these scales. Practice them on top of one another. Descend down one, switch it up, come back down the other, or come up the neck on the other opposite type of scale. Know where your interesting notes are, where your passing tones are, like your flat 3rd to the 3rd, to the root note, your flat 7, and then your flat 5. And realize you got a lot of interesting diminished triads in there that you can use. And then realize the chromatic movements. You got a lot to play with